It's time to pull up a chair and get comfortable because we've got another incredible story for you today. Here's story number one.
I am Mark Wilson. I'm 32 years old, and my own parents tricked me into paying their mortgage for 4 years, gave the house I was paying for to my golden child brother, and then left me homeless. Before I tell you how I legally evicted every single one of them and watched their world crumble from the comfort of my grandfather's rocking chair, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's a wild story, one that I'm still processing, honestly. I think it's important to share, to see if anyone else out there has ever been pushed to the absolute edge by the people who were supposed to protect them. To get the peace I have today, I had to pay a price. Not just in money, God knows I paid in money, but in blood, in memory, in the entire concept of family. I had to become the villain in their story to become the hero of my own. And it all started with a lie, a carefully constructed lie wrapped in the guise of love and concern. It's raining tonight, a steady, relentless downpour that matches the mood I was in for so long. I can hear the drops tapping a solemn rhythm against the old window panes of my grandpa's house. My house. The words still feel new, powerful. I'm sitting here in his favorite worn leather rocking chair, a warm mug of coffee steaming in my hands, and I'm watching them. My family, or what's left of them. They're standing out there on the curb, huddled together under the sickly orange glow of a streetlight, soaked to the bone. My father, Robert, looks shrunken, a ghost of the confident man he once pretended to be. My stepmother, Diana, the architect of my misery, is shivering, but her eyes are burning with a rage that could probably boil the rain right off her jacket. And my half-brother, Tyler, the golden child, just looks lost. Their fancy suitcases, the ones they probably bought with my money, are sitting in puddles on the wet pavement. My phone, lying face down on the table beside me, has been buzzing on silent for the last hour. Constant, desperate vibration. I know it's them. A barrage of pleading texts, angry voicemails, missed calls. I don't have to look. I know the script. I just take a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. The warmth spreads through my chest, a stark contrast to the ice-cold scene outside my window. It's a strange feeling, to look at the people who are biologically your entire world and to feel a profound nothingness. The anger has burned itself out. The sadness has dried up. All that's left is this quiet, hollow calm. It's the calm that comes after a hurricane has finally passed, leaving a clean, terrifying, and liberating silence in its destructive wake. How did we get here? How does a son end up locking his own family out in the rain while feeling nothing but a sense of grim finality? It wasn't a single event. It wasn't one fight. It was a slow poisoning, a death by 1,000 cuts that began 4 years ago. It started, as the most dangerous deceptions often do, with a simple, reasonable-sounding request. It started with my dad having a heart problem. 4 years ago, my life had a comfortable, predictable rhythm. I was 28, working as a junior accountant at a solid firm in the city. The work was demanding, and the commute was a beast. An hour and a half each way, crawling in traffic that sucked the life out of you. But I didn't mind. I was building a life. And at the end of every long day, I came home to a place that was truly mine. It was my grandfather George's house. He had left it to me in his will, free and clear, paid in full. It wasn't a mansion. It was a sturdy, 2-bedroom brick house in a quiet suburban neighborhood where the loudest sound was kids playing down the street. It had a big oak tree in the front yard that was perfect for shade in the summer, and a garden in the back that he had tended for 40 years. I did my best to keep it up. That house was my sanctuary. It was my anchor. It was home. My father, Robert, and his wife, my stepmother Diana, lived a different life. They had a sleek, modern house in a trendy part of the city, a glass and steel box they'd bought at the absolute peak of the market. The mortgage was a heavy chain around their necks, a fact they mentioned often. My dad was a real estate agent with a taste for expensive watches and Italian shoes, and Diana had a taste for everything expensive. Her happiness seemed directly proportional to the price tag of her latest acquisition. They had one son together, my half-brother, Tyler. And Tyler was the sun around which their world revolved. He was the golden child. It had always been that way. While I worked my way through community college, they paid for Tyler's private university tuition without batting an eye. When I saved up for a year to buy my 10-year-old used Honda, they co-signed a loan for Tyler to get a brand new Mercedes as a graduation present. I remember him complaining once that the leather seats in his first new car weren't supple enough. He'd crashed his previous car, a birthday present, and my father had quietly taken care of it, telling him, "Boys will be boys." When I got a small dent in my Honda's fender, I worked weekend shifts for a month to pay for the repair myself. It was just the way things were. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the old soul. Tyler was the one with potential. The one who needed to be coddled and spoiled and protected from the harsh realities of the world. I'd made my peace with it, or so I told myself. It was easier than admitting how much it actually hurt. The beginning of the end came on a Sunday evening. They came over for dinner, a monthly ritual. We were sitting in the living room, the one my grandpa had furnished with comfortable, sturdy furniture, when my dad suddenly winced and clutched his chest. It was a dramatic gesture, worthy of a stage actor. "Robert, are you okay?" Diana cried out, rushing to his side with a flurry of motion. "It's nothing," he said, breathing heavily, his face pale. "Just the stress, the long hours, this mortgage. It's a killer." Diana looked at me, her eyes wide and glistening with what I, in my boundless naivety, believed were real tears. "Mark, honey," she said, her voice a trembling whisper that was perfectly pitched for maximum guilt. "We need to talk." They laid out their plan. It sounded so logical, so full of love and concern. A perfect solution where everyone won. "Your commute is killing you, son," my dad said, his voice still weak and strained. 3 hours a day in a car. It's no way to live. And this big house. It's getting to be too much for us to handle in the city. "We were thinking," Diana chimed in, picking up the thread seamlessly, "what if we swapped houses, just for a while? It would be so much better for everyone." The proposal was simple on its surface. I would move into their modern city home, a mere 20 minutes from my office. They would move into my grandfather's house, where my dad could relax and de-stress in the quiet suburbs. I would continue paying the mortgage, but it would be their mortgage on their house. In exchange, I'd get to live rent-free in a prime location and reclaim 2 hours of my life every single day. My accountant brain immediately started firing off warning signals. Red flags were popping up everywhere. Get it in writing. Contracts. Lawyers. Title search. I voiced my concern as gently as I could. "That's a huge step. A really big decision. We should probably get some legal paperwork drawn up, to protect everyone and make it official." That's when Diana deployed her weapon of mass destruction. Emotional blackmail. She didn't just cry. She started to sob, real, shoulder-shaking sobs that seemed to rack her entire body. "Paperwork?" she gasped, looking at me as if I'd just suggested selling a kidney. "Mark, we're family. After all this, after your father's health scare." She gestured dramatically to my dad, who was looking pale and stressed and playing his part to perfection. "His heart can't take any more stress. We thought this would help him. We thought you would want to help him. To be in your grandpa's peaceful house. It would mean the world to him." I was checkmated. How do you argue with that? How do you demand a contract when you're being told it could literally break your father's heart? You're painted as the cold, unfeeling son, the one who values paper over people. My Uncle Frank, my dad's brother and my moral compass, called me the next day. "I talked to your father," he said, his voice grim. "He told me the plan. Mark, this stinks to high heaven. Diana has been wanting to get her hands on your grandpa's property for years. Don't do it. It's for Dad's health, Uncle Frank," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "He's not well. I have to try." "His heart is as strong as a horse's," Frank grumbled. "It's his spine that's made of jelly. She's playing you like a fiddle, kid." He was right, of course. I knew it deep down, but I couldn't bring myself to call their bluff. To appease my practical side, my father drafted what he called a memorandum of understanding. He was a real estate agent, so he knew how to make something look official. He printed it on thick, creamy paper, the kind used for fancy wedding invitations, and used a formal, script-like font. It wasn't a legally binding contract. My accountant brain knew that instantly. It was full of vague, flowery promises about future transfers of deeds and good faith agreements once the mortgage was fully paid off. It was legally worthless, but it was something. It was a written promise from my father. And at the time, that still meant something to me. It was a lie I chose to believe. So we swapped. The move was a whirlwind of boxes and frantic energy. I settled into their city house. I'll admit it was nice. The short commute was a game changer. I had more time, more energy. And I kept my end of the bargain with a steadfastness that now makes me cringe. Every single month, on the 28th, I logged into my bank account and paid their mortgage. And on top of the required payment, I always sent an extra $500. My thinking was simple. The faster I paid this off, the faster we could do the official deed transfer, and the house would truly be mine. I was literally buying my own home, just with their names on the paperwork. Over the next 4 years, I made that house my home. I wasn't just a tenant. I treated it as my own property, a long-term investment. I poured my savings and my sweat into it. I spent $12,000 gut renovating the hideous master bathroom, ripping out the old pink tile and putting in a beautiful modern walk-in shower with slate tile. I spent another $8,000 replacing all their aging kitchen appliances with new, energy-efficient stainless steel models. I tore up the stained, musty carpets and laid down $15,000 worth of gleaming hardwood floors that I installed myself over 3 grueling weekends. I even updated the entire electrical system for $7,000 after a flickering light issue revealed some dangerously old wiring. I was building equity, I thought. I was investing in my future. I was being the responsible one. Meanwhile, during the obligatory family gatherings, birthdays, holidays, the annual 4th of July barbecue, the disparity between Tyler and me grew into a chasm. He'd show up with a new designer watch, a little gift, from Mom and Dad. They funded his lavish wedding to his equally ambitious wife, Vanessa, an event that cost more than my annual salary. They paid for their 2-week honeymoon in the Maldives, posting glossy, sun-drenched photos all over social media. It was a constant public display of their favoritism. The really insidious part, the part that shows the depth of their deception, was how they handled my questions about the mortgage. Every year, like clockwork around tax time, I'd ask Diana for a mortgage statement. "Hey Diana, could you send me the latest statement? Just for my records." I'd text. "Of course, honey, no problem at all," she'd chirp back. A few hours later, a professionally formatted PDF would land in my inbox. It looked completely legitimate. The bank's logo was crisp, the layout was perfect, the account numbers were correct. And the numbers, the beautiful, beautiful numbers, always lined up with my calculations. It showed the principal balance decreasing steadily, reflecting my regular payments and that extra $500 a month I was so proud of sending. It looked exactly like it should. I had no reason to doubt it. She was my stepmother. You don't expect your own family to engage in sophisticated, long-term document forgery. You don't expect them to smile in your face at Christmas dinner while actively, systematically stealing from you. That was my biggest mistake. I wasn't just dealing with a materialistic stepmother and a weak-willed father. I was dealing with a pair of calculating, cold-blooded criminals who just happened to share my last name. And I was about to find that out in the most brutal, life-altering way imaginable. The catalyst for the implosion was a career opportunity. My firm was expanding, opening a new branch office in Chicago, and I was chosen to be part of the small team sent to get it off the ground. It was a big deal, 2 weeks of intense work, but it came with a significant pay bump and a near-certain promotion to a senior accountant role upon my return. I was ecstatic. Felt like all my hard work was finally paying off. Before I left, I made sure everything was in order. I paid the mortgage a week early. I even went over to my old house, their house now, to mow the lawn for them just to be helpful. My dad clapped me on the shoulder. "You're a good son, Mark. Work hard in Chicago. Make us proud." Diana gave me a hug that felt stiff and strange. "Be safe, honey," she'd said. Looking back, there was a glint in her eye I couldn't place. It wasn't pride. It was something else. something cold and triumphant. The 2 weeks in Chicago were a blur of spreadsheets, meetings, and late-night planning sessions. I was in my element. I texted my parents a few times, just quick updates. Long day, but things are going well. Their replies were always brief, almost clipped. That's great. Work hard. Love, Mom and Dad. I chalked it up to them being busy. I didn't think much of it. I was focused on the future, a future I was building, a future that I thought included the home I was so diligently paying for. After 2 exhausting but incredibly successful weeks, I flew back home. It was a chilly Tuesday evening in late autumn. I took an Uber from the airport, my body buzzing with fatigue and accomplishment. All I could think about was a hot shower, a cold beer, and collapsing into my own bed. As the car turned onto my street, I saw my house, its windows warm and inviting. But as we got closer, something felt off. There were lights on inside, which was strange. I lived alone, and there was a sleek, black BMW parked in my driveway, a car I'd never seen before. I paid the driver, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. I grabbed my suitcase and walked up the familiar front path. I slid my key into the lock. It went in, but it wouldn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it, pushing a little harder. Nothing. It was solid. It was like trying to put a key into a solid piece of metal. The lock had been changed. My first thought wasn't betrayal. It was confusion. Maybe there was a break-in? Maybe the lock was jammed? I knocked, a hard, sharp rap. Hello? Is anyone in there? I heard movement inside, the sound of soft laughter. The door swung open, and for a long, surreal moment, my brain simply refused to process what I was seeing. The world tilted on its axis and spun out of control. Standing there, wearing a pair of my favorite fleece-lined slippers, was my brother, Tyler. He wasn't surprised to see me. He was smiling, a lazy, arrogant smirk that I knew all too well. Behind him, lounging on my couch, feet up on my coffee table, watching my 65-inch TV, was his wife, Vanessa. The BMW in the driveway was obviously hers. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. For a moment, I couldn't form a thought, couldn't make a sound. "Oh," Tyler said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're back. We were wondering when you'd show up." He didn't move. He just stood there, physically blocking the doorway to my own home, a smug gatekeeper to my stolen life. "Tyler," I finally managed, my voice a hoarse whisper. "What are you doing here? Why doesn't my key work? What's going on?" Vanessa looked over from the couch, her expression one of utter boredom. She took a slow sip from one of my coffee mugs. "We had the locks changed, obviously, for security." "Security," I repeated, my confusion rapidly curdling into a hot, sick wave of anger. "What are you talking about? This is my house." Tyler leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms, the picture of entitlement. The smirk never left his face. It was the look he always gave me, the look of someone who knows they hold all the cards, that the game has been rigged in their favor, and is enjoying every single second of my powerlessness. "Not anymore, big bro," he said casually. He actually winked. "And by the way, your stuff's in the garage. You should probably come get it sometime this week before it gets damaged or we toss it." I stared at him, dumbfounded. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so grotesque, so monstrous, I couldn't fully comprehend it. "What do you mean, not anymore?" He finally dropped the bomb, savoring each word like a fine wine. "Mom and Dad gave it to us. It was our official wedding present. We live here now." Wedding present. The house I'd poured over $40,000 of my own money into. The house I'd been faithfully paying the mortgage on for 4 years. The house I thought was my future, my investment, my home. It was all a gift. To him. "Are you insane?" The words exploded out of me. It wasn't a question. It was a raw, guttural roar of disbelief. "Are you out of your mind? I've been paying the mortgage on this house. I renovated the bathroom, the floors. I bought the damn appliances." Tyler just rolled his eyes, a perfect theatrical gesture of annoyed indifference. "Yeah, Mom mentioned you were helping out with the payments. he said with a sigh, as if I were a mildly annoying house guest who had overstayed his welcome. That's not really my problem, is it? Look, the deed is in their name. It's their property. They can do what they want with it. And they wanted to give it to me and Vanessa. The deed? I stammered, the cold, hard legal reality crashing down on me. The verbal agreement, the fake memorandum of understanding, the 4 years of payments, it all meant nothing. I was a fool, a complete and utter fool. He then made a shooing motion with his hand, like he was dismissing a stray dog from his porch. Seriously, you need to leave now. You're kind of trespassing. Get off our property before we have to call the cops. Our property. Standing on the porch of the home I had paid for, being threatened with the police by my own brother, I felt a lifetime of swallowed resentment, of overlooked efforts, of quiet injustices, boil over and erupt like a volcano. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about every single time I had been pushed aside for him. It was the new iPhone he got while my screen was cracked. It was the designer clothes he wore while I shopped at Target. It was every Mark is so responsible, he'll understand, that I had ever been forced to choke down. It all came rushing back, a bitter, choking tide. I was suddenly, terrifyingly homeless, and they were treating it like I was a stranger who had knocked on the wrong door. I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. I just turned around, my carry-on suitcase suddenly feeling like it was filled with concrete, and walked back to the curb. I got in my old Honda, the one with the engine I'd paid to fix myself, and drove. I had no idea where I was going. I was just driving, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my vision blurred by a hot, angry haze. There was only one place to go. One place left in the world I had any claim to. My grandfather's house. The house I had so stupidly, so trustingly given to them. I drove through the rain-slicked city streets, my mind a chaotic storm of betrayal and fury. By the time I pulled up to Grandpa George's beautiful brick house, I was shaking with a rage so intense it felt like a physical illness. The lights were on. They were home. I imagined them inside, celebrating, toasting their genius plan with a bottle of expensive wine. I stormed up the walkway and pounded on the front door with both fists. I didn't knock. I hammered. Dad, Diana, open up. We need to talk. Now. I heard shuffling inside. Then, hushed, urgent voices. The silence that followed was heavy, deliberate, and more damning than any confession. They weren't coming to the door. Dad! I yelled again, my voice cracking with desperation and rage. Open the damn door. Tyler just kicked me out of my house. The house I've been paying your mortgage on for 4 years. A long, agonizing pause. Then, my father's voice, muffled and cold and cowardly, came through the solid wood. Go away, Mark. You're making a scene. Go away. I pressed my palms flat against the door, as if I could somehow push my way through it with sheer willpower. What do you mean, go away? Dad, what is going on? Open the door and talk to me. That's not your house anymore, Mark, Robert replied, his voice devoid of any paternal warmth, any flicker of shame. And this isn't your house either. This is our house now. The casual, callous cruelty of his words stole the air from my lungs. What are you talking about? This is my house. Grandpa George left it to me in his will. The deed is in my name. Diana's sharp, venomous voice joined his. You need to leave, Mark. Stop going from house to house making everyone nervous. It's unseemly. Making them nervous? The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it was breathtaking. Making you nervous? Are you kidding me? You've thrown me out of my home. Your golden boy is living in the house I renovated, sleeping in the room I paid for, and you won't even open the door to look me in the eye. We've invested a lot in this house, Robert snapped back defensively. We've done renovations, improvements. And what about the $42,000 I spent fixing up your house? I roared. The number, the exact number, burning in my throat like acid. The new bathroom, the kitchen, the floors, the 4 years of mortgage payments. What about that investment? That's different, Diana said dismissively, her voice dripping with condescension. Different how? How is it different? Diana, I was screaming now, all pretense of control gone, my voice echoing in the quiet suburban street. You planned this all along, didn't you? The whole sick thing. Get your reliable donkey of a stepson to pay off your mortgage while you live comfortably in his paid-off house. Then, once it's almost done, you gift his place to your precious Tyler and keep Grandpa's house for yourselves. A brilliant plan. Leave me homeless while you all divide up my property like vultures feasting on a carcass. There was a long, damning silence from the other side of the door. They didn't even bother to deny it. My accusation hung in the air, unanswered because it was the absolute truth. Finally, Diana's voice returned, cold and hard as a tombstone. You need to leave now, Mark. This is our house, and we don't want you here. If you don't leave, we will call the police. Something inside me didn't just snap. It vaporized. The anger, the hurt, the confusion. It all burned away in an instant, and what was left was a single point of ice-cold, diamond-hard clarity. The fog of being a dutiful son, of seeking their approval, of trying to earn their love, lifted. And for the first time in my 32 years, I saw them for what they were. Not family, enemies. My voice, when I spoke again, was unervingly calm. Actually, Diana, you're wrong about one thing, I said, my words clear and precise, each one a perfectly shaped stone. This isn't your house. I could almost feel their confusion through the door. This is my house. Legally. The deed is still in my name. Grandpa George, a man with more integrity in his little finger than you two have in your entire bodies, left it to me. Remember? He didn't leave it to you to use as a bargaining chip in your sick, twisted little games. I took a step back from the door, a sudden feeling of immense power surging through me. And since you're so fond of kicking people out of their homes, maybe it's time I returned the favor. You wouldn't dare, my father growled, a distinct note of panic in his voice now. I let out a short, sharp, bitter laugh. It was a sound I'd never heard myself make before. Try me, I shot back. I'm done being the nice one. I'm done being the family ATM. I'm done watching you use me to fund your lifestyle and prop up my worthless brother. You wanted a war? You've got one. Get out of my house, or I will have you evicted. Legally. I turned my back on the house, on them, and walked away into the cold, cleansing rain. I didn't have a home to go to. I didn't have a family anymore. But as I walked away from that closed door, for the first time in my entire life, I felt free. They had started this, but I was damn well going to finish it. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked windshield. The rage was still there, a hot coil in my gut, but underneath it, something new was forming. Resolve. Cold, hard, and unbending. I ended up at a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind with a flickering neon sign and a name like the Starlight Inn. The room smelled like stale cigarette smoke and despair, but it was a roof over my head. It was my war room. I sat on the edge of the lumpy polyester bedspread and made the phone call I should have made 4 years ago. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. Uncle Frank. Mark? What's wrong? It's late. Where are you? His voice was thick with sleep, but instantly alert. They did it, I said, the words feeling heavy and inadequate. They really did it, Uncle Frank. They gave Tyler the house and locked me out. There was a moment of dead silence on the other end. Then, where are you? I'm on my way. He and my Aunt Sarah showed up 20 minutes later, their faces etched with worry. I told them everything, the whole sordid story, from the faked health scare to the confrontation through the closed door. Uncle Frank paced the tiny motel room like a caged lion, his fists clenching and unclenching. Aunt Sarah, usually so gentle, had a look of quiet fury in her eyes that mirrored my own. She just sat next to me, took my hand, and didn't let go. I always knew Diana was a snake. Frank seethed, his voice a low growl. I told your father 100 times not to let her get her hooks in him, and he's a coward for letting her lead him around by the nose. But this is monstrous. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes blazing. You're staying with us. For as long as you need. And tomorrow, first thing in the morning, we're calling a lawyer. My friend's daughter, Emma, she knows a guy. A real bulldog. We're going to hit them so hard they won't know what happened. That night, trying to sleep on my uncle's pull-out sofa, I finally understood what Grandpa George meant when he gave me the house. He'd pulled me aside after the will was read, his hand firm on my shoulder. He'd said, "Mark, I'm leaving you this house because I know you'll take care of it. You understand the value of things, not just their price." I finally understood. They saw houses as assets, as chips in a game, as things to be traded and stolen. I saw them as homes, and I was going to get my home back. The next morning, the world felt different. The anger was now focused, channeled. It was fuel. Uncle Frank drove me to the law office of a Mr. Arthur Thompson, the bulldog his niece Emma had recommended. The office was on the 12th floor of a downtown skyscraper, a world of polished glass, gleaming steel, and hushed competence. Mr. Thompson was a man in his late 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through you, a sharper suit, and an air of no-nonsense energy that was incredibly reassuring. He listened to my entire story without a single interruption, his fingers steepled under his chin, his expression unreadable. I laid it all out. The verbal agreement, the fake health scare, the worthless memorandum of understanding, the 4 years of payments, the $42,000 in renovations, the doctored bank statements I still had on my phone, the brutal discovery, and the confrontation at both houses. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, studying my face. Then a slow, grim smile spread across his lips. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just caught the scent of blood. "Let me get this straight, Mr. Wilson," he said, his voice crisp and clear. "You are the sole legal owner of the suburban property, correct? The deed is in your name, free and clear, with no liens." "Yes," I confirmed. "And you have bank records, certified bank records, proving you paid the mortgage on their city property for the last 48 months? Every single payment, plus the extra $500 a month. And you have electronic copies of these fraudulent mortgage statements your stepmother, Diana Wilson, sent to you?" "Yes, sir. On my phone and backed up to the cloud." He leaned back in his expensive leather chair, the smile widening. "Mr. Wilson," he said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. "This isn't just a family dispute. This isn't just an eviction case. What you have here is a textbook case of fraud, unjust enrichment, and promissory estoppel." "Promissory estoppel is a legal principle," he explained, seeing my confused look. "That basically means if someone makes a promise that you reasonably rely on to your detriment, the court can enforce that promise even if there's no formal contract. They didn't just betray you, Mark. They broke the law in multiple ways. We are going to have an absolute field day with this." The relief that washed over me was so intense my knees felt weak. For the first time, I wasn't just an angry, wronged son. I was a client with a very, very strong case. "So, what's the first step?" I asked, my voice filled with a hope I hadn't felt in years. "First, we get your house back," Thompson said decisively. "The suburban property is a legal slam dunk. They are, for all intents and purposes, tenants at will with no lease agreement. We will serve them with a formal, notarized eviction notice this afternoon. The law in this state requires a 30-day notice period. 30 days. A part of me wanted them out tomorrow. But Thompson explained it was better, strategically, to do everything by the book, to leave them no legal loopholes, no room to appeal or delay. 30 days of them living in my house, knowing their time was up, knowing I was coming for them. There was a certain cold, agonizing poetry to that. During that 30-day period, Thompson continued, his eyes gleaming, "You and I are going to be very busy. I want you to go to your bank. Get certified copies of every single mortgage payment you made to them. Get the transaction records for all the renovation materials, the contractors you paid, every penny. We are going to build a financial portfolio of this fraud that is so airtight, so overwhelming, that by the time we're done, they'll be begging to settle. Because after we get your house back, we're going after the money. All of it." That very afternoon, a professional process server knocked on the door of my grandfather's house. I wasn't there, but Uncle Frank, my loyal intelligence officer, drove by later and told me what he saw. He saw the server hand the official legal envelope to Diana. He saw the color drain from her face as she read the words "Notice to vacate." He saw her slam the door so hard the windows rattled. The 30-day countdown had officially begun. The eye of the storm had passed. Now it was time to unleash the hurricane. Those 30 days were the longest and yet most productive of my life. I moved into my aunt and uncle's guest room, turning it into a command center for my personal war. By day, I was an accountant at my firm, my mind focused on numbers and spreadsheets. By night, I became a forensic investigator of my own life. I followed Mr. Thompson's instructions to the letter. I went to my bank and spent hours with a personal banker named Maria, a kind, middle-aged woman with sympathetic eyes. Together, we printed and certified every single transaction related to the mortgage payments. 48 regular payments. 48 additional payments of $500. Wow, you were really trying to pay that thing off fast, she commented, shaking her head. I just nodded grimly. You have no idea. I dug through 4 years of credit card statements, highlighting every purchase from Home Depot, Lowe's, every payment to the flooring contractor, the electrician, the plumber. I created a master spreadsheet, my natural habitat, and cataloged every penny. The final number was staggering, $42,781.52. That was the amount I had invested in their property, on top of the mortgage payments. Seeing it laid out in black and white, a cold, hard number, solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about theft. While I was building my arsenal of facts, Diana was waging a war of her own. A desperate, pathetic war of manipulation. The calls started a few days after the notice was served. She tried a new number, one I didn't recognize. The voicemail she left was a masterclass in passive aggression, her voice dripping with fake tears. Mark, honey, it's Mom. I don't know why you're doing this to us. Your father is a wreck. He's barely sleeping. His health, I'm so worried about his heart. This stress is going to kill him. Please call me. We can fix this. We're your family. I listened to it once, a cold knot tightening in my stomach, and then deleted it. A few days later, a text message from a different unknown number. It was a photo of me and my dad at a baseball game when I was 10 years old. We were both grinning, wearing oversized jerseys, a perfect picture of father-son happiness. The text underneath read, "Remember this? Don't throw away your family over a house. It's just wood and nails." My hand was shaking as I blocked the number. It's just wood and nails. The hypocrisy was so profound it was almost impressive. The final attempt during that period was from my father. He called my office desk line. I had no choice but to answer. "Mark," he said, his voice raspy and weak. "You can't do this. We'll be on the street. We'll have nothing." "You put me on the street, Dad," I replied, my voice flat and professional. The same tone I used with difficult clients. "You didn't seem too concerned about what I would have. You have 22 days left to make arrangements. I suggest you use that time wisely." It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Diana. She gets these ideas in her head. She pushed me into it. He stammered, already trying to cast himself as a victim, a passenger in his own life. "You're a grown man, Dad," I said coldly. "You're not her hostage. You're her co-conspirator. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." I hung up the phone, my heart pounding. It was hard, but it was necessary. Every pathetic attempt they made to contact me only strengthened my resolve. During that month, I did one more thing, the thing that would become my trump card. I called my friend, a guy named Chris who worked in the mortgage department at a different bank. I told him the whole sordid story. He whistled long and low into the phone. "Man, that's next-level cold-blooded," he said. "Do you have the original loan number from any of their paperwork?" "I have the doctored statements Diana sent me," I said. "The account number is on there." "Perfect. Let me see what I can see," he said. Unofficially, of course. 2 days later, he called back. "Mark, you sitting down? You are not going to believe this." "Try me," I said. Okay, so I looked up the loan history. The original loan was for $350,000, taken out about 7 years ago. Based on my calculations of what you've paid, the regular payments plus all that extra cash, the remaining balance should be, give or take, around $50,000, right? Exactly, I said, my spreadsheet open in front of me. The current principal balance, he said, and I could hear him rustling papers, is $148,721.16. I was silent. The phone felt like a block of ice against my ear. 150,000. The number didn't make sense. It was impossible. Mark? You still there? 150,000? I whispered, the words barely audible. That's impossible, Chris. Where did all my extra payments go? The $24,000. Well, Chris said carefully, it looks like for the past 4 years, they've only been making the absolute minimum required payment. Not a single penny more went to the principal. The extra money you were sending them? It never touched the mortgage account. They just kept it. The truth hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't just used my extra money. They had been systematically stealing from me for 48 months. The extra $24,000 I thought was my investment, my sweat equity, my future. It had vanished. It had paid for their vacations, for Diana's shopping sprees, for Tyler's pampered lifestyle. It was fraud, pure and simple. I thanked Chris, my voice numb, and hung up. I calmly opened my laptop. I created a new document. At the top, I typed, Exhibit A, fraudulent statements provided by Diana Wilson. Underneath, I typed, Exhibit B, official bank records. I saved the file. The 30-day countdown was almost over. It was time to lower the boom. The 30th day arrived. It was a gray, overcast Saturday morning, the sky threatening a cold autumn rain. It felt appropriate. I didn't go alone. Mr. Thompson insisted on coming with me. Along with 2 sheriff's deputies, he'd arranged to be there to keep the peace and witness the transfer. As we pulled up to my grandfather's house, my house, I saw a large moving truck already parked in the driveway, half loaded with their furniture and boxes. They had waited until the very last possible minute, clinging to the property until the final hour. I stood back on the lawn, my arms crossed, a silent observer, while Mr. Thompson and the 2 deputies approached the front door. Diana opened it. Her face, when she saw me standing there, was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Robert hovered behind her, looking pale and defeated, avoiding my gaze. The time is up, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Thompson said, his tone professional and unyielding. As per the legal notice served 30 days ago, the property needs to be vacated immediately. Diana ignored him completely and fixed her venomous gaze on me. I hope you're happy, Mark, she hissed, her voice loud enough for the curious neighbors peeking through their blinds to hear clearly. I hope you're proud of yourself, throwing your own family out onto the street like common criminals. After everything we've done for you, you are no son of mine. I had steeled myself for this. I had expected to feel a sting of pain at those words. Instead, I felt a strange, profound sense of release. She was right. I wasn't her son, and she certainly wasn't my mother. I gave a short, bitter laugh. My family? My family didn't lie to me for 4 years. My family didn't commit fraud against me. My family didn't steal my home and then leave me homeless. Robert finally spoke, his voice weak and reedy. We made a mistake, son. A terrible mistake. No, Dad, I said, my voice hard as granite. A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. A mistake is turning the wrong way down a one-way street. What you did was a calculated, long-term conspiracy to defraud your own child. There's a big difference. That's when I decided to detonate the bomb. I had planned to save it for the lawsuit to have my moment in court. But seeing her standing there on the porch of my house, wrapped in her cloak of self-righteous victimhood, I couldn't resist. It was time to strip away her last shred of plausible deniability. It was time for the real reckoning. I walked forward slowly, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. I looked up at her. You know, Diana, I said, my voice dangerously calm and conversational, I was a good son. I did everything you asked. I paid your mortgage. I even paid extra every single month because I thought I was paying down my own future. I really, truly believed that. She scoffed, a haughty, dismissive sound. We never asked you to pay extra. That was your choice. You're right, I did choose to, I agreed. But you were more than happy to take it. I just have one last question for you. I've been doing some math. I paused, letting the tension hang in the chilly air. I sent you an extra $500 a month for 48 months. That's $24,000. On top of the regular payments. According to the fake statements you so kindly emailed me every year, the loan balance should be about $50,000 right now. Robert's face went from pale to ghostly white. He knew where this was going. Diana, however, was blinded by her own arrogance. So, what's your point? I pulled out my phone. I had the 2 documents ready. I held it up so they could all see. My point is, I pulled the real records from the bank this week. The actual official balance on your mortgage isn't $50,000. It's $150,000. I let that number sink in. The deputies shifted their weight, their expressions changing from bored duty to sharp interest. So, my question for you is this, Diana. Where did my $24,000 go? She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. She had no answer. She was caught, utterly and completely caught in her lie, in front of her husband, in front of the law, in front of God and everyone. I pressed on, my voice rising with 4 years of suppressed rage. Did it go towards that trip to Europe you took 2 summers ago? The one you posted all over Facebook? Paris, Rome, Madrid. It looked lovely. Or maybe it went towards Tyler's new Mercedes. Or his private university tuition. You told me you were tight on money, that you couldn't help me fix my 10-year-old Honda. But you weren't tight on money, were you? You were spending mine. Robert looked like he was going to be physically sick. He turned to his wife, his eyes wide with a horrified, dawning realization. Diana, what did you do? Tell me he's lying. Diana's mask of victimhood finally cracked and shattered, and what lay beneath was ugly and raw and cornered. He's your son, too, she shrieked at Robert, her voice a ragged, desperate sound. He had a good job. He should have been happy to help his brother get a good start in life. We just redistributed the funds where they were needed most. Redistributed the funds? Mr. Thompson repeated slowly, a look of delighted disbelief on his face. He made a small note on his legal pad. He then looked at the deputies. Gentlemen, I believe you just heard a direct admission of felony fraud. The world seemed to stop. The movers on the truck paused. A sofa held awkwardly mid-air. A neighbor across the street, who had been pretending to water her dead petunias, stood frozen, hose in hand. The only sound was the low, diesel rumble of the moving truck's engine. Diana stared at me, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. She had nothing left. No lies, no manipulations, no moral high ground. She had been exposed utterly and completely, not in a private courtroom, but on the front porch of the house she had stolen, in the light of day, for all the world to see. She didn't say another word. She turned on her heel, stormed into the house, and started barking orders at the movers to hurry up. Robert just stood there for a long, agonizing moment, looking at me with the eyes of a stranger, before shuffling back inside, a broken, defeated man. I watched them for another hour as they finished loading their lives into that truck. When they were done, Diana got into the passenger seat of their car without a single glance in my direction. Robert hesitated by the driver's door, looked at me one last time, a pathetic, pleading look on his face, and then got in beside her. I watched them drive away, down the street my grandfather had loved so much, until they were gone. I walked up the steps and into the house. My house. It was in chaos, with drawers left open and bits of trash strewn about, but it was mine. I walked through the rooms, touching the familiar walls. I stood in the living room and breathed in the faint, comforting smell of old books and lemon polish, the smell of my childhood, the smell of home. The weight I didn't even know I had been carrying for 4 years. The weight of their expectations, of their lies, of my own desperate need for their approval, lifted from my shoulders. The storm was over, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the fallout was just beginning. And I was ready for it. I picked up my phone, not to call them, but to do one simple, final thing. I logged into my bank account, went to the bill pay section, and I deleted the automatic monthly payment for Robert and Diana Wilson's mortgage. The payment was due in 3 days. Let's see how they'd redistribute their way out of this one. The silence that followed their departure was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. For the first 2 days, I just existed in the house, reacquainting myself with its sounds and smells. I methodically cleaned up their mess, throwing out the trash they'd left behind, wiping down every surface until it gleamed. I changed the sheets on the bed in my old room, the one that had been my sanctuary as a teenager. I walked through my grandfather's garden, pulling weeds with a vengeance. The irises he had planted were blooming, their vibrant purple petals a stark, beautiful contrast to the gray emptiness I felt inside. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was a void, a hollowed-out space where the complicated, messy, painful thing I called my family used to be. I was free, but freedom felt unnervingly quiet. On the 3rd day, exactly as I had predicted, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I had a pretty good idea who it was. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification popped up. The message was from Diana, and her voice was no longer pleading or hateful. It was a new sound. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated panic. "Mark, where is the mortgage payment? I just got a notification from the bank. It's past due. They're going to charge us late fees. This is going to ruin our credit. You have to pay it. Call me back immediately." I listened to the message and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. This was the first real consequence, the first domino to fall. I deleted the message. An hour later, another call, this time from my father. I answered, putting the phone on speaker as I continued to unpack one of my boxes. "Mark, thank God. Pick up the phone. Diana is going crazy. You have to make the payment. We had an agreement." "An agreement?" I repeated, my voice calm and even. "Which agreement was that, Dad? The one where I paid your bills while you lied to my face? Or the one where you gave my home to my brother? You broke every agreement we ever had, real or imagined. That mortgage is your problem now." "But we can't afford it," he pleaded. "Not without your help." "Then I guess you should have thought of that before you decided to commit fraud," I said, and I hung up. I then blocked both of their new numbers. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. Felt like power. Felt like peace. A week later, the real fallout began, trickling in through reports from my family's intelligence network. Namely, my Aunt Sarah and Cousin Emma. The first wave came from Emma, who had a knack for getting the juiciest details. "Mark, you are not going to believe this," she said, her voice a mix of shock and morbid fascination when she called me one evening. "Aunt Diana called Mom last night, full-on hysterical, crying and screaming about how you've ruined their lives. She said the bank is threatening foreclosure and they have no money. She had the nerve to ask Mom to co-sign a loan for them. Mom, of course, told her to go to hell, but in a much nicer, more church lady way." "Good for her," I said, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. "Oh, it gets so much better," Emma continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Apparently, when Diana and Uncle Robert told Tyler he would have to start paying the mortgage on the city house himself, he threw an epic tantrum. He screamed at them that they promised him a free house, a turnkey lifestyle, not a mountain of debt. Our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, said she could hear the shouting from across the street. Tyler told them it was their problem, not his, and that they had to figure it out. The seeds of betrayal they had so carefully planted were beginning to sprout, and their bitter harvest was starting right in their own toxic garden. They had created a monster of entitlement, and now that monster was turning on them. The next update came from Uncle Frank a few weeks after that. He had run into an old friend who worked at the same real estate agency as my father. "They're in deep, deep trouble, Mark. Frank told me over the phone, his voice heavy. Your father has been trying to refinance the city house, but with the late payments now on their credit report, no one will touch them. He's burned through all their savings, even taken a massive penalty to dip into his 401k. The word around the office is that he's distracted. He's losing clients, and he's desperate. The picture was becoming clearer and more detailed. They hadn't just been living off my money. They had been living a complete fiction, a life far beyond their means in every aspect. That expensive car, the lavish wedding, the designer clothes. It was all a house of cards built on a foundation of secret loans and my stolen money. And I had just pulled out the single, load-bearing card that was holding the entire flimsy structure together. Then came the bombshell that explained everything, the final, missing piece of the puzzle. It was from Aunt Sarah, who had activated her extensive network. "Mark, you're sitting down, right?" she asked, her voice practically vibrating with the scandalous news. "I was talking to Carol, Diana's sister's cousin, and she told me the most incredible thing. Do you know why they were so incredibly desperate for you to keep paying that mortgage?" "I have a few ideas," I said dryly. "It's worse than you think," Sarah said, and I could hear her leaning into the phone. "It turns out they took out a second mortgage on that city house about 3 years ago, a home equity line of credit. They told the bank it was for necessary home improvements. It wasn't. They used the entire line of credit to pay for Tyler's Mercedes and that ridiculous 2-week Maldives honeymoon. They're in debt up to their eyeballs, Mark. They don't just have one mortgage hanging over their heads. They have two. A second mortgage. Of course. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. My extra payments hadn't just been stolen for their slush fund. They had been a crucial part of the monthly cash flow that allowed them to service their mountain of secret debt. They weren't just trying to get a free house out of me. They were using me as a human shield against a financial apocalypse of their own making. 3 months after I stopped paying, the final, glorious act of their internal family drama played out. It was Mrs. Henderson, my old, wonderfully observant neighbor from the city, who called me with the news. "Mark, dear, it's Gladys Henderson. I thought you might want to know. There was quite a spectacle over at your old place this morning." "Is everything okay, Mrs. Henderson?" I asked, though I had a feeling I already knew the answer. "Well, that depends entirely on your point of view," she said with a dry chuckle. "Your parents showed up with 2 police officers. They served your brother and his wife with an eviction notice. Their very own son." I was speechless. "I saw the whole thing from my kitchen window," she continued, clearly enjoying herself. "The girl, Vanessa, was screaming her head off about broken promises and being lied to. She was packing her designer bags into a taxi so fast I thought she'd break a nail. She ended up leaving your brother standing there on the curb, looking like a lost puppy, with all his video games and expensive sneakers in trash bags around him. It was really something. They had turned on their own. The golden child, the one for whom they had sacrificed their integrity, their honesty, and their relationship with me, had been cast out the second he became a financial liability instead of a shiny asset. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a steak knife. Vanessa, the ambitious manipulator, had abandoned ship at the first sign of real trouble. The perfect family had completely and irrevocably imploded. I knew what was coming next. It was inevitable. The final, desperate move on their scorched earth chessboard. They had run out of money, out of credit, and out of sons to sacrifice. There was only one person left to turn to, me. I just had to wait for the knock on the door. And this time I would be more than ready. The knock came on a Sunday evening, almost 6 months after my world had been turned upside down. The autumn leaves were a carpet of red and gold on the lawn, and a biting wind whispered promises of the coming winter. It was the kind of evening meant for staying inside, for warmth and comfort. I was in the living room in my grandfather's chair, reading a book under the warm, yellow glow of his old lamp. The knock wasn't loud or angry like my own had been 6 months prior. It was soft, hesitant, a timid, defeated sound that barely carried over the whistling of the wind. But I heard it. I felt it. I placed my book face down on the table, marking my page. I took a deep, steadying breath, letting it out slowly. I walked to the door, my footsteps silent on the hardwood floors. I looked through the peephole, the small circle of glass that distorted the world outside. It was them. My father, my stepmother, and Tyler. Just the three of them, a sad, broken little trio. Vanessa, true to form, was nowhere to be seen. She had made her choice. They were huddled together on my porch, not for warmth, but for some semblance of shared support. They looked thin and worn out, hollowed out by reality. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by worn-out jackets that did little to fend off the cold. The arrogance, the smug certainty, the condescension. It was all gone, stripped away by months of struggle, leaving behind a raw, naked desperation that was pathetic to behold. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. I didn't say a word. I didn't invite them in. I just stood there in the doorway, a silent sentinel, waiting. Diana was the first to speak. The fire was gone from her eyes, replaced by the dull gloss of tears. They looked real this time, born of genuine self-pity. "Mark," she began, her voice cracking, a pathetic shadow of its former commanding tone. "Please, we have nowhere else to go. We've been staying in a weekly rental, but the money's gone. The bank is foreclosing. We officially lose the house next week." My father stepped forward, his shoulders slumped in a permanent posture of defeat. He looked 10 years older. He couldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he stared at a spot on my chin. "Son," he said, and the words sounded foreign and rusty coming from his lips. I know we made mistakes. We made terrible, terrible mistakes. But we're still family. You're my son." Tyler, the fallen prince, couldn't even look at me. He just stared at his worn-out sneakers, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He finally spoke, his voice a sullen mumble. "They told me the house was a gift. They said it was all taken care of. It wasn't an apology. It was an accusation aimed at them. Even now, in their shared ruin, they were pointing fingers. Family." I repeated the word in my head. I looked at them, really looked at them, one by one, without the distorting filter of a child's desperate hope for approval. I saw my father's expensive watch was gone. A pale, naked strip of skin on his wrist where it used to be. I saw Diana's perfectly manicured nails were chipped and bare, her hands looking nervous and old. I saw the designer logos on Tyler's clothes had been replaced by a generic, faded hoodie. This is what consequences looked like, stripped of all pretense, shivering on my doorstep. "Family," I finally said. My voice was quiet, dangerously quiet, but it cut through the wind. "Let's talk about family, Dad. Is it family when you manipulate your son with a fake health crisis to get your hands on his property?" He flinched. "Is it family, Diana?" I continued, turning my gaze to her. "When you forge bank statements for 4 years to cover up your theft?" Her tears stopped. Her face hardened. "Is it family when you steal his money he was saving for his own future, to fund your vacations and buy your favorite child a luxury car? Is it family when you take the home he's been paying for, the home he's been improving, and then throw him out onto the street like a piece of garbage?" "We were wrong," Diana sobbed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "So wrong. We were desperate. You don't know what it's like. Please, Mark, help us. We're not asking for much. Just a little money to get an apartment, a security deposit, just to get back on our feet. We'll pay you back. We swear on our lives." I almost laughed. A swear on their lives. What was that worth? They had already sworn on their family, on their love, on their honor. All of it had proven to be worthless. I thought about what I should do. The old Mark, the dutiful, desperate to be loved Mark, would have felt a pang of pity. He might have wavered. He might have written a check, not out of forgiveness, but just to make the awful, uncomfortable feeling go away. But the old Mark was gone. He had died on a cold porch 6 months ago, and the man who stood in his place had learned a very hard lesson. I stepped back from the doorway, a small but clear signal that they were not welcome inside my home. "Do you know what Grandpa George told me before he died?" I asked quietly. They just stared at me, their faces blank and confused. He said, "Mark, I'm leaving you this house because I know you'll take care of it. You understand the value of things, not just their price." I didn't fully understand what he meant back then. I was too young. But you, I said, my eyes sweeping over all three of them, you taught me exactly what he meant. I looked them each in the eye, holding their gaze until they looked away. You taught me a very valuable, very painful lesson. You taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is to let them hit rock bottom. You taught me that you can't save people who are determined to drown. You can only let go so they don't pull you under with them. Enabling your destructive behavior isn't kindness. It's poison. And I'm done drinking poison for you. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned out clean, leaving behind something harder, something more permanent than steel. A boundary, a line etched into the ground that they could never, ever cross again. I am not giving you any money, I said, my voice firm and final, each word a stone dropping into a deep well. Not a single cent. You are all able-bodied adults. You have your health. You have each other. You can go get jobs just like I did when I was a teenager. You can figure it out, just like I had to when you left me with nothing but the clothes on my back. I paused, then delivered the final, crushing blow using their own words, their own callous advice against them. But I will give you a piece of advice. It's the same advice you gave me when I was locked out of my home in the middle of the night. Go rent an apartment somewhere. A flicker of the old, entitled Diana returned, her face contorted with rage and disbelief. But where will we go? She wailed, the question laced with indignation. What will we do? I gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. My voice was soft, but my words were a guillotine. Like you told me, I said, that's not really my problem. And I closed the door, gently but firmly. I didn't slam it. I didn't need the drama. The quiet, final click of the deadbolt sliding into place was the loudest sound in the world. It was the sound of a chapter ending. It was the sound of a prison door locking from the inside. It was the sound of my freedom. I walked back to my grandfather's rocking chair and sat down, my legs suddenly feeling weak. I didn't pick up my book. I just sat there in the warm, quiet house, listening. Outside, I could hear them arguing, their voices faint, muffled by the door and the whistling wind. The sound of a broken machine, its gears grinding against each other. After a few minutes, I heard a car door slam, just one, and then the sound of a sputtering engine driving away into the night. And then, there was only silence. The peaceful, wonderful, absolute silence of a home that was finally, completely, and irrevocably mine. In the days and weeks that followed that final, quiet confrontation, a new kind of silence settled over my life. It wasn't the empty, hollow silence I'd felt at the beginning. It was a rich, peaceful silence, filled with potential. There were no more panicked phone calls, no more desperate text messages, no more dramatic, soul-sucking appearances. It was as if my family had been a source of constant, grating static in the background of my life, and now that the signal was cut, I could finally hear my own thoughts clearly for the first time. I didn't hear from them directly ever again. The news, what little there was, came in fragmented, second-hand pieces from my aunt and uncle, who heard it through the reluctant family grapevine. They had moved into a small, run-down apartment complex in a town 100 miles away. My father had gotten a job as a cashier at a large home improvement store, his real estate license having lapsed. Diana, who hadn't held a job in 20 years, was working as a hostess at a chain restaurant, her forced smile a fixture of her new life. Tyler was working as a delivery driver for an app, his Mercedes long since repossessed. They were surviving. That was all. There was no grand redemption arc. There was just the quiet, grinding reality of a life they had built for themselves. Did I feel guilty? For a long time, I searched my heart for guilt, thinking it should be there. But it wasn't. Did I feel a sense of triumph? Not really. The cold satisfaction of that final confrontation, of watching their lies unravel, had faded. It left behind something much more complex and human. It was the quiet, bittersweet ache of a necessary amputation. I had cut off a diseased limb to save my own life. I was healthier for it, I was free, but I would always have the scar. I would always know the place where something was supposed to be, but wasn't. One Saturday afternoon, I was cleaning out an old closet in the spare bedroom and found a dusty cardboard box of my father's things he'd left behind in his haste. Inside, nestled amongst old tax returns and forgotten necties, was a photo album. I sat on the floor and flipped through its stiff, yellowing pages. I skipped past the glossy, posed pictures of his wedding to Diana, past the endless photos of a young, smiling Tyler on various expensive vacations. I stopped at a picture from before all that. It was just me and my dad, on a fishing trip at Miller's Pond when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. He was holding up a tiny, pathetic-looking sunfish I'd caught, but his grin was a mile wide. We both had the same wide, proud, toothy grin. For a moment, I could almost smell the lake water and feel the summer sun on my face. I remembered that man, the man who taught me how to bait a hook, the man who told terrible jokes, the man who seemed like a giant, the father I had loved, and the father I had lost, long before he ever chose his new wife's greed over his own son's well-being. I felt a pang of deep, profound sadness, not for the man shivering on my doorstep, but for that boy in the photo, and for the father who had so spectacularly failed him. I closed the album and put the box back in the closet, out of sight. It was a part of my history, but it didn't have to be a part of my present. That night, as I stood in the quiet living room, my eyes fell on a small, empty nail on the wall. It was where a big, gaudy family portrait with Diana and Tyler had once hung when they lived here. I had taken the picture down on my first day back, stuffing it in the trash where it belonged, but for some reason, I'd left the nail. I walked over to the kitchen, got a pair of pliers and a small towel from the utility drawer, and came back. I placed the towel against the wall to prevent any marks, gripped the head of the nail with the pliers, and slowly, deliberately, pulled it from the wall. It resisted for a moment, then came free with a faint squeak. It left a tiny, almost invisible hole. I ran my finger over the small imperfection. I knew I could patch it up tomorrow. A little spackle, a little paint. I could make the wall smooth and clean again, as if nothing had ever been there. It was a small act, but it felt monumental. It was the final step. I wasn't just occupying my grandfather's house anymore. I was building my own life on my own terms within its strong, safe walls. The future was a blank wall, waiting for me to decide what to hang on it. And for the first time in a very long time, that thought didn't feel scary. Felt like peace. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it touched you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make an impossible choice to protect yourself? Share your story in the comments below. I read them all. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.
And that brings us to the end of things. Before you go, be sure that you like this video and you subscribe to the channel and ring that bell so that you never miss another great video like this one. See you next time.